Hey everyone, Jay here. Just wanted to make sure you know that I have a new teacher training group starting online in October, and you can get an early registration discount of 40% off until September 7th. So if it's something you've been considering, now is definitely the best time. You can find out more and register at jbrownyoga.com/training. Also, I recorded this series of mini talks with current participants so you could hear from them directly what the program was like. Today, we talked to Trent.
Hi, Trent.
Hello, Jay.
Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well. It's a nice practice.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it. There was that new person there, which made it fun for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's interesting because she is a teacher herself. I don't know if you heard her mention this, but she recently stopped teaching. I think she didn't go into all the details, but I felt like some bit of like existential crisis in her over it. And then afterwards, she talked to me about the training. So I think she's considering doing it. You might actually end up meeting her because you'll still be in the training if she joins it. Which I should say, I feel like I need to keep us focused because I know the way you and I are together, this is challenging. It'd be very easy for us to go on for a long while about any range of topics that you and I have mutual interest in, but we are here for some specific purpose. So I'm going to try to keep us focused on that if I can.
Fair enough.
All I would say to that is the reason why you and I would easily sort of spiral off, and maybe you'll come on and we'll like record a full-length episode sometime together. But I think that's because you're a bit of a rare instance for me where somebody shows up and like sort of right off the bat seems to already have a real handle on what I'm doing in a deep way. Like there's a time or a moment with somebody where often if they've like known me for a number of years and they've been in my class for a long time and they've become a teacher, and then, or even somebody who just, I don't know, has come to know me over some time, at a certain point, I feel like this person really gets what I'm doing. And I'm able to have a certain kind of conversation with them about practice because of that. And I feel like that with you, but you've only been here for like, I don't know, at least with me in the training for like, what, 3 or 4 months or something? So
yeah, 4 months.
Yeah, so to me, that's happened very quickly. And I guess I am curious about that. Would you say that that's because you spent time with either my podcast or practice before, or would you say there's something in practice that's doing that? What do you think that is that you seem to be able to have such a handle on, like why I'm doing things the way I'm doing things?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. And that you touched on. One is I practiced with you on the video. I listened to your podcast. I read some of your blogs and the writing, and there was intuitive connection there. We were swimming in the same water. And when we began the practice, when I joined your program and got involved, I saw so many qualities, if you will, and the cultivation, your emphasis on cultivating those qualities that are very similar to my tradition in Zen and Tai Chi, the background in internal martial arts. And there's just an approach that we share. And we share a similar approach. Yeah.
That makes sense. And I think that that's something that you and I are going to get into more, and that we haven't gotten to yet, that like the approach someone takes is really rooted in philosophical viewpoints, I think. And that's where you and I will be getting to, and anybody who joins the new group in the training, that's sort of where we start often, is kind of the philosophical viewpoints behind different approaches. Because it is either like through a conscious choice or not always a conscious choice that shapes someone's practice. I suppose, what do you think it is about the approach that distinguishes it? I imagine you have other approaches that you've explored as well in terms of yoga practice and different types of yoga classes. What would you say about the approach that you're doing with me? What do you think is distinguishing it from other approaches?
Oh, I have a background in been trained in Zen yoga. I've been trained in Yin yoga, somatic yoga, advanced training in these over time. But the central piece that I connect with, and it is inherent in everything that I mentor on, is the breath. Your breath centric practice, and how it pulls everything together. There's a Anapanasati is a Buddhist mindfulness of the breath sutra, and that informs everything that I do, and that is how I experience your practice. It's mindfulness of the breath, mindfulness breathing, and it forms the postures into asanas that move into mudras. In my experience, it's formed inside, internal with you. That's I'm always harping on that, as you know. That's my experience with you, and that's how I come to it. And I think we connect very deeply in that aspect. Yeah.
Well, I think that is probably one of the things that's really bringing us together is that experience. I'm of the same, as you said, song as well. For me, that comes from Desikachar teachings of kind of centering breath in terms of asana and vinyasa. So we definitely come together on that. I suppose the other thing I'm curious about is how your experience of like the actual training program and the format of like the weekly meetings and the replays. I don't, you know what I mean? It's such a hard thing to find a balance of like structure and leaving things open. I want things to be self-directed, but I also try to provide a structure. You come a lot, so you're like in the meetings a lot. Not everybody comes to all the meetings, and that's okay. I guess you've done other trainings, I gather, and how are you finding the kind of way that I've put things together?
It's outstanding. It's at once a graduate level immersion training, and at the same time a deep dive into personal practice. It's equal parts. And Dad, I'm a practitioner, and and I mentor from there, but that's what I do. I practice. And your training program it's an immersion, and there is, we talk about transmission, and that's not in an esoteric way. This is not the way I'm going to talk about it, but in a relationship, and it forms into one-on-one, and of itself, you're always available to all of us in that aspect, and certainly to me, and it's self-inquiry. It's what it is, and discovery. Very classical education, holistic in nature. The way we go through it over a course of time, that it's absorbent. You get to absorb this and not just fly by. That's my background says you work with someone, and that's what we do. And that it's outstanding to me. Yeah.
Oh, well, Trent, it means a lot to me that you would feel that way. And again, we haven't known each other for very long, but I already feel very inspired. I feel like students like you make me a better teacher for sure. And I'm so glad that you're in the training, man. I look forward to the time that we've got remaining in your program and beyond that. So very cool. Let's leave it there. Thank you so much for doing this, my friend. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure, Jay. My pleasure.
All right. Well, I'll be seeing you soon. I'll see you at a meeting tomorrow. All right.
See you soon.
All right. Cheers, man.
Cheers.
All right. Here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. And if it so happens that this is your first time here, let me welcome you. Everybody else, what's up? How's everybody doing? How was your week? Ooh, it is late summer. if you're a long-time listener, you know that in years past, I have discussed the late August feeling, the calm before the storm sort of feeling that I always get this time of year. And I certainly feel like that today. I don't know how your week was, but mine was quite hectic in some regard. You see, I came back last week with my eldest daughter early because my eldest daughter is in the high school band and she had to come back early for band camp. So I came back early. My wife and my youngest daughter stayed at my in-laws. Speaking of which, last week I asked people to pray for my stepfather because he had a PET scan that he was going to have. We were hoping for good results. And I am happy to say that the results came back clear. No cancer. Best possible news. So thank you to everybody who put in a good word for my father-in-law. I'm happy to say he's doing well and hopefully on the continued mend. So that was really, really great news. And as I was saying, I came back earlier with my eldest. My wife stayed with my youngest daughter. So this week I was on like solo parent duty, which was really great in some ways. I definitely bonded with my eldest daughter in new ways, I think. But it was also really hard to do all of my stuff and take her to all the places that she needs to go that her mom is usually schlepping her to. I had to take care of all of it, and it was not easy. And in some ways, it kept me busy. It kept my mind on things. I just had daily tasks that I had to bang out. And then today my wife got back. I'm sitting here in the attic. I'm reflecting on things, and I must admit, it feels like a foreboding moment. It feels like a lot of people I know once again are facing difficulties, not just me. And in some way, some of it feels like it's like under the surface. Like yesterday, my neighborhood association, some of you know I'm involved. I'm the vice president of my neighborhood association. We put on a community event at our local park here. We had a bouncy house, and like the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts did bake sales and stuff. And we put together this thing, and you never know if people are going to really show up. But a bunch of people did, and people brought their kids, and it was really wonderful. We had like a community day event, and it went well. And while I was at this community event, I was connecting with a bunch of different people, some people I knew, some people I hadn't met before. But when we were having conversations about, how things are going, there was this subtle feeling, and maybe I'm just projecting, maybe it wasn't there, but it felt like everybody was doing their best to kind of find the best possible picture of their situation and looking to be positive, but you could always feel a little hedge. You could feel a little sentiment of doubt, like there's other things that aren't being said, and there's underlying anxieties. And it just feels like there's times where things have like a pressure cooker vibe to them, and it felt like that, and I took note of it. And I feel like that again today, and I'm just putting it out there because I'm betting I'm not the only person who senses that. And it's interesting because certainly yoga practice is a way to kind of address this percolating feeling of unease or underlying difficulties, or even like I was saying a few weeks ago, just like everything being more expensive and people having financial difficulties. And yoga practice is definitely the way that I, look to provide some resource to us to see if we can address these difficulties and dysfunctions in ourselves and in our surrounding environments. But really, like the techniques of yoga are a holistic approach, so it happens gradually over time. It's not like a quick intervention, that happens. And sometimes an intervention might be warranted. And I know a number of different people who have turned to psychedelics. And I recently noticed that an old friend of mine, my guest today, Chara Caruthers, had started moving into that field, which kind of surprised me. I knew Chara from some years ago, like before the world fell apart. We connected on a couple of different mutual interests and inquiries that we were on. And then I've just been out of touch with her some, and I noticed that she had gone in this other direction and was kind of working in the world of psychedelics. And I was like, really? Chara's in psychedelics? So we ended up connecting to discuss what she's been doing and some of the aspects of psychedelic therapy. I frankly got mixed feelings about it. So it was interesting to learn about it and just ponder some of the questions that it brings up. And I couldn't have been more happy to do that with Chara. So great fun to connect with Chara again. And it is my pleasure to be sharing it with you today. Real quick before we get to it, let me mention that if you're enjoying this show and you would like to help support it and get access to the full-length archives, perhaps you would consider becoming a podcast premium subscriber. For as little as $5 a month, you can have a big impact in helping me continue to do this. Also, if you want to connect with me in other ways outside of listening to the show, there's opportunities for that. Ongoing classes and a weekly discussion group. I've got an upcoming teacher training. I think the early registration is until September 7th. If you want to find out about any of my stuff, Podcast Premium or the training or any of the other things I've got on offer, you can find everything at jbrownyoga.com. Okay. I think we're going to leave that there. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get into this. Let's listen to this conversation I had with Chara Caruthers.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing
last time I saw you, and I've got way less.
I was just thinking that. That is so funny.
It's great to see you, Jay. It really is.
Oh, it is great to see you too, Chara. You know the deal. I'm already recording, so let's consider ourselves having just begun, okay? No surprises.
All good, all good. Yeah.
Oh my Lord. I have to say, I just looked. I always do this. I was like, oh, when was Chara on the show? And I was shocked because it was September of 2019.
Wow. What is that?
6 years ago.
How does that time go by so quickly?
I was like, that's crazy. I can't imagine that 6 years has gone by. That's so wild.
Yeah. Wow. And the beauty is like so much has happened in that 6 years too, for both of us.
That's true. A lot has happened. I haven't caught up. I mean, I followed a little bit. You know, I don't know that I ever even really sent you a note when Maria passed. That was a very hard moment there, I know. And I can imagine it was particularly hard for you.
Yeah, it was pretty rough, actually. I think that's still unfolding, but you know what it's like. I mean, you know what grief is like. It's a complex and ongoing experience, you know?
I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but it's sort of, I wrote an essay, a college essay that was about my mom, and it was called Grief, the Asymptote of Death, because it was all about how asymptotes are forever approaching, but it's just forever approaching. So it's always ongoing, as you say, you know?
Indeed. Oh.
But that also fuels quite a bit of our choices in our direction, doesn't it?
Definitely, actually. And it's interesting because it's something that I've been kind of diving into a little bit more deeply recently. Just, you know, it's one of those things on the path that comes up and you see it in people and you feel it in yourself. And for me, it starts to illuminate why I make certain choices in my life, and certainly why the people that I spend my time with these days, I see it. I see how grief has touched them and maybe influenced, you know, where they are and how they make choices in the world.
Yes. And it isn't just grief, it's all sorts of things that shape those choices. And it's interesting to me because last time you were here, we talked about Ayurveda.
Yeah.
And I just had a conversation the other day with an old friend who went in that direction as well. And that's sort of like the lens through which she's seeing everything right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, to me, at that time when we were spending some time and when I had you on the show, it seemed like we were both communing a little bit on wanting to get to practices that were going to be deeper than just asana. Like we were looking for ways to get to kind of like deeper transformational spaces, you know?
Yeah.
And you were using Ayurveda at the time as the kind of lens that you were using, but it does seem like you made a pretty big transition since I spoke to you last into some new areas of study. So can you say something a little bit about, you even mentioned that you had experienced some frustration around supporting people trying to make changes in their lives. And I imagine a lot of people listening have had similar frustrations. And I'm curious how you would articulate those frustrations or what the process has been for you in terms of the change of direction that you've taken.
Okay, well, that's great lead in. So, and I have to say, like, before I dive in too much, I think Ayurveda is always going to be the lens through which yoga and Ayurveda are always going to be the lens through which I see everything. And so for me, though, I spent many years, on the yogic path, and also supporting folks who mostly would come to me because they were struggling in some way. So they may have had some experience with yoga, they may not have, but they were struggling in some way. And what I'd be most often would be sharing with them would be the tools of yoga. You practice them every day to some degree, and you over time you see a result. Over time, it's funny too, because for me at least, my experience of yoga and practice of yoga has always felt like just doing things day to day, and then at some point later you realize, oh, things have shifted, things have changed.
Yeah, with consistency over time, and then you sort of notice it. Wow, that happened, and almost like but it takes some consistency in time, and you have to sort of stick with it over a while.
Yes, exactly, and that is hard in this very distracting and challenging world. And it's hard for all of us, really. But the frustration that I was sort of seeing, or at least feeling, around this was seeing people constantly sort of, and with the deepest amount of compassion too, I must say, and empathy, like seeing people just falling off the wagon again and again to their own frustration, and really wanting to transform, really wanting to make changes in their lives, but really struggling for whatever reason. And so around 2017, 2018. So this was even before, we talked, and these were things that were brewing in my mind. I had started hearing a little bit of whispers about psychedelics, and psychedelics weren't anything that I had ever, I obviously knew about them, like, everybody knows about psychedelics, but I hadn't really experienced it. I hadn't really dived into it. It just wasn't. You
never took shrooms with your friends or dropped a tab of acid or went to a Grateful Dead concert or anything like that?
I never did any of that. None of that in college. And now as I'm sort of exploring it more, I'm starting to have an understanding of partially why, at least. But I never did any of that. And so, I never thought much about it. But around 2017, I started hearing things about it. And then around 2018, I started reading things about it. And as I was reading about these experiences, they were different to the experiences that I'd heard about. You always hear about these sort of, people kind of wigging out or jumping off a roof or, all these kind of wild things. But the experiences that people were describing as I was reading around 2018, 2019, they sounded a lot like my experiences in meditation. These sort of And in the psychedelic world, we use the term ineffable. There's no words to describe it. It's a feeling, but it's this unitive experience. It's this knowing. Sometimes we call it a noetic experience. And when I was reading this, I thought, wow, that's interesting. You can take a substance and reliably have an experience like that. I have had all of, 3 of those types of experiences in 20 years of meditation. And I know how those experiences impacted who I am today, how I choose today, all of those things, my capacity for discernment and consistency. I know how those things impact it. And I thought, whoa, this could be amazing. This could be amazing support for those folks who I've been working with who haven't had the benefit of having these deep experiences, for whatever reason, maybe because, they haven't, their meditation practice hasn't been consistent, or maybe because they've been distracted by life, or whatever it may be. But I thought, right, I'm interested in knowing more about this.
I really think it's interesting. And the way that those experiences through meditation they're earned through practice, and they're few and far in between sometimes. And like you said, 3 in a lifetime or something, but those do shape you, right? Because I've had that happen where there were 1 or 2 in my life that I can think of, moments that were in the context of meditative absorption where I experienced something that clearly convinced me that there was something beyond. There was something bigger and beyond. There was a spiritual realm. And just having an experience that there is a spiritual realm and there is a unifying something or whatever really did shape my person. So that makes sense. I could I hear a voice in the back of my head where there's like a snobby yoga teacher voice or something that would be like, well, you taking a drug can't be the same thing. But the truth is, potentially it could be. And those experiences would still have a similar impact for someone, I would imagine. I will say, the last time I ever took psychedelics was after I had gotten very deep into yoga. And I had been really very deeply absorbed in meditation, and it probably was at my most kind of for lack of another way to say it, kind of blissed out period in my practice, and just feeling the oneness and was beautiful. And someone, rare guy knew, said he had this very special acid that was made, was very pure, whatever. And he gave me, it was a dropper, it was liquid. Yeah. And I was by myself in my apartment. And it was a deeply profound spiritual experience for me. It was one of the most deeply profound spiritual experiences I've ever had, just being by myself in that state. And in it, I felt that I received a message that told me that I shouldn't do psychedelics, or that I didn't need to, that I didn't need them. And that I was to continue to do this path, but it felt in harmony. So it's interesting to me that you make that connection between mystical experiences in meditation and the kind of mystical experiences that someone might have through psychedelics. I will ask you one thing about, not one thing, I want to ask you a lot of things about it, but one thing my mind also goes to is I have a lot of friends, not a lot, a couple, who got really into ayahuasca, one really into Daime Church, real authentic ritual. But then also he kind of got a source for it and was doing it on his own all the time too. And he was spending a lot of time in the astral, and it seemed like it was really impacting his life here in a way that didn't seem so great. So there does seem to be a lot of cautions around it. It's not just run out and get some psychedelics and we can all have mystical experiences that are going to help us in our lives necessarily, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things. I mean, I think, the yogic path basically discourages any of that. And it invites us into this deeper practice. It recognizes, just like you were saying, like, we don't need the psychedelics necessarily. There are other pathways to this experience. And so that's something that I'm very much behind, because I have seen, now that I'm kind of more involved in the psychedelic world, I have seen abuses, and I have seen kind of wayward engagement with psychedelics. And partially, like, I'm coming to believe that, and I don't know, I mean, I don't really, all I have is my own experience, really, but I'm coming to believe that a part of that is because we don't culturally have the tools for living from an understanding of these experiences. And that was sort of the next thing that kind of pushed me more further into the psychedelic space, was that I saw a film, I think it was maybe 2019, that was a documentary, and it was created by a team of Israeli researchers who were researching psychedelics for mental health challenges, for PTSD primarily. And the film, it featured three characters or whatever. It was documentary, so there were three individuals who had been dealing with PTSD for a really long time. So there was like a first responder and a soldier, a young soldier. And so at the end of the film, these folks had gone through this whole process. There's protocols around psychedelics these days when they're applied in these more therapeutic contexts. Mm-hmm. So they'd gone through this whole process, and at the end of the film, they spoke to each of the folks, each of these different individuals, and they asked them, like, how do you feel? How has this changed? And all of them were like, yeah, it's completely different. I feel very different. I feel, my life, the way I see the world is very different. But one of them, the young soldier, he was drinking the Kool-Aid. He was saying, everything's different. But there was this look in his eye. And I thought, okay, I've seen that look before. And he was asking the questions, not just by the look, but he was actually asking the question, like, what now? Where do I go now? I've had this experience. I still have a family. I still am living in a world that doesn't give me any clues about how to live from this understanding, from these unitive experiences, from all of this. And literally
doesn't always feel very unitive when the cable company is jacking up your internet cost or whatever,
and your family is asking things of you, or the world around you is pushing you in one direction or another. And I thought, this is what I want. This is what I need to do in this space. Yoga and Ayurveda offer the tools to live from an understanding of your divinity day to day. The questions, the practices, the general philosophy. And I thought, right, I'm going to shift a little, and I'm going to start diving more deeply into how to support people who have had psychedelic experiences and integrating these experiences. And
is that what transpersonal psychology is about? Or I saw you got a degree in that. Is that related to that?
Yes and no. So the transpersonal psychology thing was sort of an adjunct. It was after COVID. I noticed from working with clients that people were really having some mental health challenges. Like, it was very different. You could see it. It was this, I'm sure you had that experience too.
It makes me think I'm getting ready to have a conversation with people in a teacher training about scope of practice. And when you want to be somebody who's helping people in interpersonal ways, but you got to know what you know and what you don't know. And certain times you get to a certain place with someone and it's beyond what you feel equipped to address or help someone with.
Exactly. And I was seeing these challenges, and what it was telling me was, we are in for, a tsunami of mental health issues. And I thought, goodness, I had, for years I had thought yoga as a foundation. I had thought yoga is a really great tool for supporting people with, to improve their mental health on various levels. It's not psychology necessarily, but it felt to me like a set of tools that are very powerful and very useful. And so I thought, but most people see yoga as asana. So if I go out, trying to help people in their mental health and I'm talking about yoga, most people are going to be like, yeah, well, I already do that exercise. And yeah, that's great.
How's down dog going to help me stop worrying about stuff?
Exactly. But there are other things, other understandings, other practices that people didn't necessarily think of as yoga. So I thought, you know what, let me do some more study. Let me kind of legitimize, quote unquote, legitimize my, wisdom, whatever it is, knowledge, myself, and do some further study. And so I looked at psychology, but I thought, no, this is all about pathology. Psychology is really all about how do we fix what's broken.
Yeah,
and
the DSM, right, or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just thought, no, I'm far more interested in human potential than I am in Western culture pathologizing of the challenges that we have.
Right.
And
like a yogic Ayurvedic lens. It has a worldview or like a metaphysical orientation potentially, as I said. The word, that was a phrase that you wrote that I was like, ooh, I want to talk about that. But like, it has a worldview that psychology doesn't always even allow for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But transpersonal psychology does. So transpersonal psychology, it extends, more traditional psychology to include the transcendent, the spiritual aspects of the human experience. And so I thought, this is interesting. And of course, the psychedelic movement, primarily in the United States, or actually, no, Western for the most part, the psychedelic kind of the growth and evolution of psychedelics kind of began with psychiatrists and psychologists who had taken psychedelics. And the transpersonal psychology discipline, I should say, started with psychiatrists and psychologists who had taken psychedelics. And in doing so, realized, oh, there's so much more that we're not exploring here. Folks like Stan Groff and various other folks, but they began this sort of deeper dive into all of those aspects of the psyche that traditional psychology wasn't exploring. And
I mean, it's really interesting because I mentioned that those friends of mine and their experiences were not with people who also studied psychology. They're like shamans.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious about, are you now someone who like administers psychedelic experiences for people, or you just work with people who've had psychedelic experiences?
Well, a little bit of both. I do a lot of things actually in this.
That's true, I'm sure.
So at the moment, I'm working with an organization that trains psychedelic facilitators. And so it's a year-long training program. So I sit with people every week, similar to your yoga teacher calls. I sit with people every week who are interested in what does it take to be a psychedelic practitioner? What does it mean to hold space for psychedelic experience? And so we go through the year and they learn about themselves and about the practices. So I do that. But then I also have worked on or with teams of people who facilitate in a retreat setting. So, primarily in the Netherlands, I've gone and, been in the room with 20 people who are taking, psilocybin as a part of the facilitation team, holding space for those folks and then supporting them before all of that happens, and also supporting the individuals after all of that happens in support. And my work, the work that I'm really wanting to do in the world is a lot more around that support, the preparation and the integration. Yeah.
See, that's the preparation thing. Let's talk about that. What are the sort of things that you think? I had a friend on, my friend Conchetta, who was doing some of this too. We talked a little bit about set and setting.
Yeah.
But what are the things that you have observed are important in order for these kind of experiences to not have negative effects? Because sometimes they don't always go great, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's there's lots of schools of thought about what's being called challenging experiences these days, as opposed to, bad trips. We used to call them bad trips.
They don't call them bad trips anymore. They call them challenging experiences. Huh?
Yes, challenging experiences. So there's lots of schools of thought about about challenging experiences or bad trips. There's some folks who say there isn't such a thing as a bad trip. Like, everything is giving you some material to kind of work with. But there are folks out there who have been, who have been damaged by experiences, psychedelic experiences. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that, there is such a thing as a bad trip. There are people who are being
psychotic breaks and things can happen. Yes.
Absolutely.
There's a risk involved because there's an unpredictability to those substances.
Exactly. And so a lot of research has, been looking at how do we integrate. It's been looking at the other side of things, like once we're all done, once you've been through the experience, how do we integrate? But they're set and setting, but an understanding of set and setting, which is it comes from indigenous, pattern or indigenous approaches to psychedelics, really. But the term set and setting really does come from the early days of psychedelics in the West. There's a recognition that, hold on, there's things we can do on the front side of things. There's things that we can do to prepare people beforehand. And so now more research is being done into the idea of preparation. And what I recognized from my own personal experiences with psychedelics was all of my 20 odd years of yoga practice before I ever did a psychedelic prepared me for the psychedelic experience, the first psychedelic experience, and all of them actually since then. But what we're starting to recognize is that set and setting is complex. It's very complex. Set is mindset, your mindset. And that really does, as we know, that's everything that's happened before you, lay down on that mat or whatever it is that you're doing. And setting, which is traditionally maybe the environment around you. It might be the room that you're in. Usually a facilitator or sitter is kind of thrown in with the idea of setting. Setting can be equally as complex. It can be the political, situation or environment in the world or where you are. It can be the body, your body as a setting, and that impacts the mindset. So there's a lot that needs to be looked at with respect to preparation. And in my view, I think, and this is stuff I'm starting to research more and look at, I think far more work needs to be done in terms of preparation, because preparation is traditionally is like, okay, we'll just be calm,
or like they'll sometimes prescribe don't eat certain things or don't have sex. There's I've heard different protocols that people will tell people before they go on their ayahuasca retreats or whatever, right?
It depends. It very much depends. So something like ayahuasca, which has a indigenous, foundations, it has a whole process that goes with it. So yes, things like dietas, certain foods, and things like detoxes and things like that, that's a part of the entire process. But when you think about things like, mushroom, psilocybin, LSD, even MDMA and various other psychedelics, there aren't necessarily traditions that go along with those things, at least not in the Western world. And so, you might be given some advice to maybe eat light, to think about an intention, some of those sorts of things. But what we're starting to see from some more research that's happening on these challenging experiences is that one of the biggest reported issues that people are experiencing is what we're calling ontological shock. And ontological shock.
Ontological shock. Is that what you said?
Ontological shock, yeah. And ontological shock is really just a kind of a complicated way or a fancy way of saying my understanding of reality was completely obliterated in this
Having
experience.
your mind blown, literally.
Totally. Yeah. Completely. And, it's even just that idea of oh, my mind was blown, that sounds like a light.
It sounds cool and fun and hip, but it could be shattering probably.
Having an experience where the foundations of what you understand, reality to be pulled out from underneath you can be quite destabilizing. And, people who have grown up, Christian are, and have some worldview are diving into these experiences and having things that are challenging that worldview, or, our worldviews can actually be challenged in these experiences. And it can cause you to question everything, really. And so there's not a lot of work, on the preparation side to speak to people about that. Like, what is your understanding of reality? Because we don't ever think about it. We think, well, I'm living in reality. This is it.
And are the people, do you think that there's some people who shouldn't do this? Like, it's not necessarily something everybody should do necessarily. 'Cause the reason I say that is even in terms of certain meditation practices I've done, where I've gone to certain spiritual realms, like I referenced earlier, I've moved away from some of that kind of practice too, like trying to astrally project or see people's auras or tap into certain things. At a certain point, again, I get certain messages that were like, no, that's not for you to do. That's you trying to be God or something. And that is what you're sort of talking about in terms of worldviews. Like, I think sometimes people tap into mystical realms through through psychedelic experiences. But like you say, how that becomes a healthy thing in your life might not be all that clear,
Yeah. I think when I put my Ayurveda hat on, I think psychedelic experiences are not for everyone. They're just not, and the challenge and this is what we're facing right now as in a Western world. So in a more indigenous setting, there would be a shaman or
rites of passage and rituals and community that all grew up with it. Yes, I know what you mean.
And there would be years of preparation, quote unquote, preparation in community. And there would be somebody who would say, you're ready, you're not ready. This is for you. This isn't for you.
Right.
And various other ways of exploring, and more traditionally, the shamans would take the psychedelics and engage with the individuals who were maybe coming for, with questions or with challenges. But in our Western world, we're using a more Western medical model to kind of put on top of psychedelics, which is a whole nother thing. But we just do a health screening. We look for certain things. Do you have a family history of mental health issues? Do you have, heart issues or, high blood pressure or various other things? And we do a little tick, 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 tick. Yeah. And okay, you don't have anything on here, let's just go. But there aren't any of those real deeper questions or understandings that might come out of a longer experience of preparation. Like, how sensitive might you be? And it's hard to know if somebody hasn't had.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.